Thanks very much for coming along. I'm Peter McCabe, if you didn't know me. You've dodged a bullet until now. So thanks for coming along, as I say, and this is a very special event for me. You're going to see a 54-year-old man cry like a 4-year-old. So before we start then, I'll just tell you what's going to happen. So we're going to, for about over half an hour, they're throwing things. Over half an hour then, Mary will play my granny in the first person. Then we'll have a short break where we'll have tea and coffee. And then after that then, Aaron, who's we're distantly related, I will go through a few old photographs in addition to the one that's behind of my granny. Particularly when she was visiting the metropolis of Knocknamuckley, so in County Armagh. So that's the story. That's the way it's going to work. Thanks to a few people first before I start. Thanks to Justin for recording it tonight. Thanks to Pete at Willowfield Church, and for Brian as well for sorting out the venue. And thanks to yourselves for coming. But special thanks to Mary. So I'll hand you over to Mary Lindsay. Thank you.
Hello everyone. On my 81st birthday, my eldest grandson Peter gave me a grandparents book, and this is it right here. I thought it was a lovely opportunity to think back on my life and record some of my special memories of my family, about me, and the things that have been important to me throughout my life. The book is full of questions. My earliest memory: where did I live? How many rooms were there in my house? Did I have a room of my own? Did I move home? There's many, many questions that will take you through my life. So tonight I'd like to read some of those special moments and give you a glimpse of Jean's life. My name is Jean. It's actually Jane, but you can call me Jean, as everyone else does. I was born Jane Mays on the 13th of January 1920 at 30 Susan Street at the bottom of the Newtonards Road. I was called Jane after an aunt of my mum's who lived in Govan in Scotland, but as I've said, most people just call me Jean. My grandfather, Thomas Mays, was not a very tall man and was heavily built. I don't remember him, as he died in 1923 and I was born in 1920. My grandmother was his second wife, and he had 9 children to his first wife and 9 children to my grandmother. I'm not sure where my Granny Pollock went to school, but I presume it was in Knocknamuckley. My grandfather was a farmer, and my granny had a lot to do looking after hens and milking cows. They married in Knocknamuckley Parish Church and lived there in the cottage on the farm. My granny died in 1940 when I was 20 years old. I always remember her waiting for us to arrive when we were children. She stood at the top of the lane and was always happy to see us. She wore long black skirts and short boots, a cap on her head going out to milk the cows, and a white nightcap going to bed. She also had a white apron to wear when baking and another one for wearing when she was cleaning. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a soldier in the Guards. My mother was 9 years old when he died, so I didn't hear much about him, only that he died with some illness he picked up when he was abroad, possibly in India. My father, Joseph, was born on the 10th of October, 1894 in Knocknamuckley, outside Portadown. He was an average height with dark hair and a lovely ruddy complexion. He was brought up on a small farm and came to Belfast in the shipyard as a dock labourer, and then met my mum. He was a very good father. His main interest was his home, his wife and his family. I always remembered him singing about the house. The lass from the county down was a favourite. My mother was Margaret Cummings, born on the 27th of October 1890 in Guildford, County Armagh. She didn't have much time for outside interests and baked bread every day and knitted for all of us. Mum kept a clean and comfortable house for her family. She was a good mother, patient but firm with us. She was also good to the neighbours, who often sent for her when they were anxious or worried. The first of my brothers and sisters was Letitia, known as Lita. Born in August 1917, sadly Letitia died on the 20th of December 1920, aged 3, with diphtheria. I don't remember her, as I was only 11 months old when she died. My brother Thomas was born on the 24th of September 1922. Tom and I were great friends, and he looked after our brother Joe when he was young, and I mothered another one of our brothers, Jackie. We were a very happy family and played together in the house and outside. Tom was a very gifted pianist and could play by ear. He was in the Air Force and came home and lived with Vinty and I for 18 months. Tom had married Molly while he was away and couldn't get a house when he came back. Tom and Molly had 2 boys together, Jack and Mark. Tom ended up as a postmaster in Lisburn and lived for years in Woodland Park. He died on the 23rd of February 2000, aged 78. Elizabeth, known as Betty, was born on the 30th of September 1926. I actually remember when she was born, I was under the impression I was getting a new doll. Sadly, my beloved sister Betty died when she was only 14 with heart trouble. My brother Joseph Alexander, known as Joe, was born on the 10th of May 1932. He was born again at Billy Graham's meeting when the great preacher preached on "Thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting." Joe married Margaret and they had one son, Brian, living for years in Macahan Park and then Bangor West. Joe was an engineer and became a partner in the company Williams and Shaw before retiring. The youngest of the family, William John, known as Jackie, or wee Jackie to us, was born on the 24th of February 1935. Sadly, dear wee Jackie often complained of a sore throat, and on 24th of October 1940, aged only 5, he died of diphtheria like our sister Letitia 20 years previously. I was heartbroken when wee Jackie died, but it must have been even worse for my parents, having lost 3 of their children. We moved to Hatton Drive off the Woodstock Road in 1928 when I was aged 8. My father bought the house for £280. 30 Hatton Drive had an attic bedroom, a sitting room, a patch of garden in the front. We also had a living room, 2 bedrooms and a kitchen. I shared a bedroom with my brother Tom when he was born. I can remember moving from Susan Street to Hatton Drive and having to change from an old school, which was in our street, to the modern new school, Euston Street Elementary, which opened in 1926. I also remember my parents talking about the general strike in 1926. And remember my parents talking about the first cars they saw in the country. People used to stop when they heard ones coming and watch them pass. I walked to school as it was only around the corner. I liked English and composition, as well as writing into a copybook which had lines of perfect handwriting, which we all then copied in our books. I quite like arithmetic, but did not like history. I remember one of our teachers who mustn't have liked it either, as she went out of the room and left us to our own devices instead of teaching us the subject. I didn't get into any trouble at school, thankfully. I enjoyed singing at school, but didn't learn to play any instruments there. We had a piano at home, so I learnt to play the piano there. I didn't play any sports at school and didn't have a part-time job. I do remember being in a picture house once and seeing a silent film. I didn't dance, but I remember the dances of the 1920s with the daring ladies wearing short skirts and bobbed hair. We played different games at school. I played with dolls which had china faces and broke when they dropped. And we played card games like Snap. We also played darts and bagatelle as a family. I also remember learning to knit and always enjoyed knitting and still enjoy it to this day. When I was very young, we didn't have parties on my birthday. I perhaps had a friend over when I was a little bit older. At Christmas, I remember getting toys on Christmas morning, as well as an orange, an apple, a new penny. And we also went to our chum's house to see what Santa had brought them. I grew up in a very happy home with a good father who had no outside interest, just my mother and us. We used to go for long walks together, and my father took us to Willowfield in the mornings on Sunday. Mum went at night and Dad stayed with the wee ones. My dad would visit his mum in Knocknamuckley in the country and often took one of us with him. I left school at 14 and wanted to work in a shop, so I worked in a draper's shop on Newtonards Road. I didn't like it and stayed only a year. I was paid 5 shillings a week when I was serving my time. The shop hours were 9 to 6 on Monday, Tuesday and Thursday, and 9 to 1 on Wednesday, 9 to 8 on Friday, and 9 a.m. to 9:30 on Saturday. After that, I worked in the city centre with the Belfast Damask and Linen Company at 13 Wellington Place. We supplied sheets, pillowcases, tablecloths to big hotels, mostly in England. I caught the tram car to work and later on the trolley bus. At the weekends, we sometimes took the train to Bangor, Newcastle, Portrush or Donaghadee. I liked plays and concerts and liked Joseph Locke singing. I also liked to go to border regiment concerts and enjoyed listening to the bands on the radio and singing the popular songs of the day. Dance bands were popular on the radio then. That was before TV came. I remember a bomb landing at the top of Hatton Drive and 3 people were killed at number 1, the first house on the other side of the drive. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if that bomb had landed slightly further down the street. A few years ago, I went to my old school in Euston Street and spoke to the children about my memories of the Blitz. My mother was living in Guildford with her aunt as my sister was ill and died there. My father, brother Tom, and I stayed in the house in Hatton Drive. My father boarded up the windows, which were blown in. There was only one other family living there for a while during the Blitzes. In 1941, my brother Tom joined the Air Force and he married in the 40s. We had rationing in the blackout, no light in the streets and no light allowed to be showing from the houses. We looked forward to the bright moon nights, which also brought fear of air raids. My 2 young brothers and sisters were evacuated to Guildford and Ballygargan to my aunt's. We tried to live as normal as possible, always hoping and praying the war would soon be ended. When the war did end, there were great celebrations. Crowds gathered in the cities and people were dancing in the streets. The spirit of the country was high and people looked forward to a better life ahead. It was a long time before things returned to normal. When rationing stopped, the many thousands of people who had lost their homes were rehoused in prefabs and so on. During the 1930s, ordinary working people didn't have much money and a lot of people here were unemployed. My father was never out of work, but his wages were small. My mother was a good manager with money and could make a little go a long way, so we never wanted. We had electricity put into our house in 1935 or 36. Before they would bring the cable down the street, 12 people had to sign a form to say they would have it put in, so we were among the first to have it. We had a light in every room and a two-way switch on the stairs and one 5-amp plug in the living room for the iron. And eventually we had a wireless set plugged in. I remember the fire at Crystal Palace. We didn't have a TV then, so we didn't see pictures, only read about it in the papers. I heard the announcement by Prime Minister Chamberlain as I was getting ready for church on the Sunday morning. His words were, "We are now at war with Germany." Our immediate reaction was, this will be the end of civilization. But the whole country managed to get through with the help of Mr. Churchill, who kept the spirit of the people up with his many speeches. "We will fight them on the beaches, in the streets. They will never win." That was a famous one. The main thing that got us through were answers to prayer. I also recall the opening of the Parliament buildings at Stormont in November 1932 and the visit of the King and Queen in July 1953 after they were crowned. I also recall great sorrow at the death of King George VI, as he was loved by the people. I had and still have great admiration for Queen Elizabeth at her coronation, as she was so young to take on such responsibilities. I was always involved in the church at Willowfield, as well as the CE, Christian Endeavour. There was always something going on in Willowfield. I enjoyed rambles and outings in the summer and concerts and meetings in the winter. For holidays, I remember going to my granny's in Knocknamuckley for a week and enjoying the freedom of the country. We played outside, and on wet days, we played in the hay shack. I also liked going with Granny to milk the cows and helping her make the butter. I would also go round the hen houses to gather the eggs. We also went for a week to Scotland to visit my auntie and sisters, and we enjoyed that too. I remember going to the Empire exhibition in Glasgow in 1936. The only other holiday that we had until then was to Portrush. My first date was with Vinty. We met at the CE meetings in Dromore Street Hall, which belonged to our church. We were both in our teens and were both working at that stage. We went for a walk, and then mostly we went out in a group with others after that. I suppose you could say that we were mutually attracted to each other. We were keeping each other company for years. We were engaged for a year and a month, and we were both living with our parents at that time. Both sets of parents seemed pleased enough, but they didn't make a fuss. We married on the 11th of April 1944 in Willowfield Parish Church on the Woodstock Road. I was aged 24 and Vinty was 28. I remember Vinty was much more nervous than I was, but it was a happy day for us both, with friends and family around us. I wore a blue dress and jacket. Ada, Vinty's sister, was bridesmaid, and Tom, my brother, was best man. Ada's suit was a darker blue, made the same as mine. I carried a bouquet of tulips, which opened up to look like roses. We had 30 guests, and the reception was in my parents' house at 30 Hatton Drive. My mother had to save from our rations as the war was on, and friends helped with food too. After 57 years of marriage, most of our presents have worn out now. A lot of the presents were money, as in wartime things were scarce. Our first 5 presents were lemonade sets, 6 glasses and a jug. We have a picture in the sitting room, which was also a wedding present. It is a watercolour of the Barnesmore Gap in Donegal. It was given to us by a girl I worked with and painted by Mr. Neil, who lived on the Woodstock Road. Our first home was the one we are still living in, 5 Kensington Avenue. During the war, houses were hard to come by. My father bought 5 Kensington Avenue and rented it to us for 9 shillings a week, until we saved the money to buy it from him at the price he paid for it, £455 in cash. We had gas light and had to wait until the war was over to get it wired for electricity. It needed decorated, so we had to make do and mend. We painted walls and then dabbled different colours over it. It worked quite well, and it did until after the war when we were able to buy wallpaper. If the woman who lived in the house before us saw it, she wouldn't recognise it now with all the improvements we've made over the years. I remember once we decided we needed to live closer to Willowfield Church. So I asked Vinty to ring the estate agent and find out the price for a house that we had seen in Ardenley Avenue. Vinty rang and he was told the price and he said, "Well, I hope you get it," before hanging up. And that's the last time we talked about moving. However, of the houses in which we were reared in, I think Vinty and I would choose to live where we are now, 5 Kensington Avenue. After I got married, I didn't go back to work. Vinty was paid weekly and his wage was £4 and 13d a week. Our first child, Margaret, was born just before midnight in Hatton Drive on the 16th of January 1945, weighing £8 and 4 ounces. Our son, John Mays Craig, was born on the 22nd of April 1949, also at Hatton Drive, and he weighed £9 and was born about 6:30 a.m. Both Margaret and John went to Elm Grove Primary School, a short walk away on the Beersbridge Road. Margaret went to Bloomfield Collegiate after 11+, while John went to Grosvenor. We never were short of things, but we did have to be careful about money. We never worried about money as our friends were all in the same boat. We went to events in the church hall. In the summer, we took the children to the beach, sometimes just to Hollywood or Bangor and back for a shilling. Newcastle was a day return for 1 and 6. We used to hire a bungalow for a month in Bangor West, and most years we went to my cousin in Scotland for a week. Later on, we went to Portrush for 2 weeks. We were very content with our lives. People were easier pleased then. A friend of ours said that he was deprived, but no one ever told him that, so he didn't know. In those days, a small treat brought great happiness. These days, I get a bit annoyed when I hear children saying they were bored. Kids these days have so much compared to when I was a child. As I said, a small treat brought great happiness. And when we made do with things, we played outside and just had great fun. I had a couple of very good friends, Nan and Edith. I met Nan at school, and after I left school, I asked Nan to come to the CE with me, and she came. I suppose we got on well because we were interested in the same things. Nan never married, and she visited us every week until she died. I met Edith at the CE in the church. Edith married and had 3 children. We visited each other every week while the children were small, and years after they married. Edith and I shared confidences with each other, as well as our joys and sorrows down the years. She was a good friend and a good listener. Edith was actually the sister of Margaret's husband, Glenn's father, so I suppose Edith was also a matchmaker, as Margaret and Glenn were first introduced as babies, thanks to Edith. I have happy memories of going on holiday with Edith and Harry, and very happy memories of weekends with Edith on the bowler's weekend. Edith died with cancer when she was 66 years old. Vinty and I are still friends with Edith's husband, Harry, now. I have a few other friends now, Lillian, Emma, Ivy, Roberta, Isabel, as well as a few others. We just call ourselves the girls. In the late 60s, early 70s, I remember decimalisation coming in. It was confusing at first, but very soon we began to forget the old money. I remember going out with Vinty to lift insurance. He had had training in the new money, and I didn't know much about it. I stayed with him until he called it 4 houses, and then I went on my own. It was hard working with both kinds of money. Better when we were completely decimalised. Our first car, bought in 1969, was a black Morris Minor. We paid £185 for it. We really enjoyed this car because we were able to go places we hadn't been able to go without. We then had a second Morris Minor, which was grey. We paid about £200 for that in 1971. Then we had a number of Vauxhall cars. We had a blue Vauxhall bought for £600, then a green one bought for £700, then we bought a gold one which cost £1,600, then a pale green Viva which was £2,000. Next we had a black Silhouette Chevette which cost £4,000. And we bought our last car, a gold Vauxhall Nova, in 1985. We drove to Killarney for our 25th wedding anniversary, and we went to Wicklow that same year for holidays in the car. We also did a lot of touring in other parts of Ireland, as well as Scotland and England. Other years we met my cousin and her husband, and we hired a cottage between us. We stayed in Crail and Maybole, and then Sandhead, all in Scotland. I would have liked to have visited the Holy Land and walked the roads Jesus walked, but never had the opportunity as we didn't have the money. When we had some money, we went to visit John and Heather in South Africa in 1974. John and Heather were married in 1971 and then went to live in South Africa in 1972. That was one of the most exciting things that has happened to us, and we had such a happy time there. We went to South Africa again in 1983 to meet our 2 granddaughters for the first time, Caroline and Kelly. Kelly's full name being Kelly Jane. Now, I've no wish to travel far. However, we would like to have the health to maybe go to Portrush for a day. When we eventually got a TV, we saw so many things. In the 1960s, I remember England winning the Football World Cup. There was great excitement about it. I saw pictures of Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. I think everyone was watching the TV to see them coming back and greatly relieved that they were so well after their experience. I also remember very well sitting in the house and the TV was on when the announcement came through about President Kennedy being killed. Everyone was very shocked. In the 1980s, I remember watching the London Marathon on the TV and seeing Prince Charles and Lady Diana being married, and seeing Pope John Paul on TV too. TV and other modern appliances are all things we take for granted now, but they do not bring happiness. The more money people have, the more they want. Money just does not bring satisfaction. We now have washing machines and other technology to make life easier for us, and yet people have less time than they used to help each other. Our ambitions at our age are very few. Maybe we will be spared to see more of our grandchildren's weddings, as we so enjoyed being able to attend Peter and Jane's wedding. What made me most happy was having a happy home life before and after marriage. I also enjoyed watching our children growing up and getting married, then our grandchildren growing up too. We're looking forward to having great grandchildren as well. I would say the best bit of advice I've ever had was from my father when we got married. He advised us never to buy anything until we had the money in our hand. We could then go where we liked to buy whatever we wanted to. Vinty took this so literally that he wouldn't take out a mortgage to buy another house, which is the result that we're still living in the house where we started in. My hopes for the family would be that they would all come to know Christ as their Saviour and that they would have happiness in their relationships. For our country, I would hope we would have a lasting peace and be able to live with each of our neighbours and each worship in the church of their own choosing. I would hope there would be peace in the world and no more people starving and living in poverty. Thank you so much for listening to a few of my memories here in Willowfield Church Hall, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Well, thanks very much, Mary, for that. It was amazing. So we'll take like a 10-15 minute break. Just get a cup of tea or coffee. Also, I need to apologise to Mary for the very short notice that I gave her with the text. So the story was, I knew about this book, and but I didn't realise that my granny had written another book until last night when I started reading through it. So then Mary was, I think they'll only go on for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then I thought, well, we'll see about that. So using text out of the other book then, I swamped Mary. So Mary had just come back from Glasgow and was expecting a relaxing evening, and I totally wrecked it. So amazing job that you were able to turn that around so quickly, and apologies for dropping in it as well. So we'll take a 10-15 minute break. If anyone needs loo, it's out that way, and then this should open on my command. No. And we'll get tea and coffee out of here. So thanks very much. 10-15 minutes and then back for Aaron and I to show you some photographs from yesteryear. Thank you.